wake up with the sun and struggle through the day. In every passing moment, watch your life.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Shamanic Philosophy Podcast, a pseudo-scientific, quasi-philosophical, non-expert discussion platform dedicated to a holistic exploration of the human experience. Shamanic Philosophy isn't just a podcast, but a community. We're a tribe of extended family from around the world who believe that together we have the power to make it a better place. We believe that that change starts within each one of us and spirals out to our relationships and interactions. I'm Adam, and I feel so blessed to be here with you. Today we're stepping out of bounds a bit from our usual field of discussion and getting into some politics for a little bit. You may know my guest as Deez the Liberal from Instagram, a guy who writes a lot on politics and current events, and somebody I've developed a lot of respect for over the last year or so. You may know by now that I'm neither liberal nor conservative by pretty much any definition. But what I respect about Derek is that although we disagree on plenty of things, we always manage to do so cordially and respectfully. And personally, I think he's probably just got his shit figured out better than most liberals or conservatives that I talk to. Whether we agree on everything or not, he knows why he believes what he believes. And he's actually put some real thought into it, unlike a lot of people taking part in political discussions these days. And that's good enough for me. It was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. I'll probably try to pull him back in on occasion to dig deeper into some specific topics, but this was a great conversation to kick off our first politically themed podcast. I think you guys will really enjoy it. I certainly did. So here we go, talking with Deez the Liberal. And I'm here with Deez the Liberal. He's a buddy of mine from Instagram, and came across your page about maybe close to a year ago. I got on about May for the first time. And anybody who listens to the podcast or follows my social media platform knows that I'm a fucking alien as far as politics go. I'm nowhere on the political spectrum in terms of U.S. politics. And it makes it difficult for me sometimes to get into anything conservative or liberal because my views just don't line up. And one of the things I've always loved about you is you're straightforward, you're a no bullshit guy, and unlike people who affiliate themselves with any part of the spectrum, you can actually defend your viewpoints intelligently, and you can do so without just blindly attacking people like a doofus. So,
well, thank you.
So I appreciate that, man. What is give me a little bit on you. Like this is the first time we've gotten to have a good conversation. We've exchanged a lot of stuff on Instagram, but what are you about politically? Where'd you come from politically? You know, even geographically, that stuff all plays into it. Like, what makes you you?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I guess for me, the 2016 election was just really eye-opening. Like going into it, I've always voted Democrat, right? I grew up internationally, so I spent a lot of time overseas. I got a, I don't know if that's a broader worldview or not.
I think it is.
It is, and maybe it is, right? And so I think, if you have that, maybe you have the benefit of not judging people based upon certain characteristics like, the color of their skin or their gender or their sexual preferences.
I think that's a big part of it, and I've always said too that humans are creatures of imitation. You know, and we tend to imitate what we see. And whenever you get to travel the world like that, you see different ways of doing shit. I think that gives you a broader perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I spent some time in Japan. I went to high school overseas, and the Japanese society is very closed, very tight knit. They're super friendly, but on the surface, right? So you're never really a part of that group. And if you think about the word gaijin, which is a lot of people commonly know as foreigner, right? It actually has a bit of an undertone to it of like danger and out of place and someone that doesn't belong.
Alien.
And so, an alien, right? And so they treat you like a bit of an oddity there, right? And so I think growing up in that kind of formative years during high school, being subjected to that, and I don't want to over dramatize it. I'm not trying to say that I grew up poor black in the South, right? I mean, that's not a fair comparison, right? But I experienced a little bit of what that might be like, right? And so I think as far as politically, I'm super liberal. socially, right? And then I think about like politics across a couple of different spectrums, right? So socially, I really don't care what people do in their bedroom, right? I don't care if man loves another man and wants to marry that man, a woman loves another woman and wants to marry that woman. I think it's ridiculous that was even a debate.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing around transgender is ridiculous. I mean, I can't imagine somebody being feeling like they're born into the wrong body, right? Like,
what a
imagine,
shitty place to be born.
Oh my God! Like, I mean,
talk about being black in the South. Imagine being fucking male in a female body.
Right, and so the arguments against it that I see from the right, from the conservative element in politics, is all, well, we need to protect kids, and there's predators in the bathroom, and it's all just nonsense. When you apply logic to it, it just sort of crumbles apart, and the undertone that I see in all of it is bigotry, right? Bigotry in some form. Whether that's against women, whether that's against transgenders, whether that's against gays, whether that's against somebody based on the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their religion, whatever. It's all just this common thread of bigotry, right? So socially, I'm really liberal. Fiscally, I tend to be kind of moderate, but I look at, and I'm a bit of a stats geek and a bit of a numbers geek, just working in information technology. But I see like from the Reagan period on, this development in our country of based upon this governance of trickle-down economics, right? So we give tax cuts to the rich, and it's all just kind of sort of rained down.
It all makes its way down.
Yeah, like manna from heaven, right? And it just hasn't worked, right? If you look at like wealth distribution, it's upside down, and it's as bad as it was before the Great Depression in the 1930s, right? So something isn't working. We've been doing it for 40 years, and it's just not working, right? And the one thing I would say internationally, it was kind of the other part of it that I disagree with both parties, is I'm really non-interventionist, right? Like, I just don't think we can export democracy at the business end of a gun, right? It just, that whole nation building and that whole concept of what we try to do in Iraq and what we're doing in Syria. And, if you're like me, watching the news, it's probably likely at some point tonight we're going to start firing Tomahawk cruise missiles at Syria. And, what are we doing? Like, what's the point, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's what I believe, then I try to say, okay, well, what party aligns best with that beliefs, and neither really do, right? Totally.
That's it.
But I sure as heck don't see it out of the Republican Party.
Well, let me ask you, because that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I've wanted to talk to you about this for months. I'm so glad we get to have this conversation. But like the whole two-party system, the fuck, man. Like, is there any way that that's going to make sense in a country of 330 million people?
It's not, it's not. And God, I hope it breaks itself up a little bit, right? Because I think there's two wings in the Democratic Party. There's a very liberal, socially progressive, economically progressive kind of, left wing of that party. And then there's a sort of moderate, more centrist wing. And I think you saw that with Bernie and Hillary, right, in the primaries. And those two have some really different, beliefs.
Very different, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think you can almost cleave that party apart into two, pretty sizable parties. And then you could say the same for the Republican Party. You've got this like kind of hyper nationalist wing that I think has a lot of like just, anger and bigotry running through it that, you could break that out and really have that be like the new Dixiecrats, right? From like the 20s and 30s in the South, right?
Have you ever met a Dixiecrat, like in real life?
No.
I have.
No. Have you?
I have, yeah. I was with a Hispanic buddy of mine. Imagine that. And we were in Huntington, West Virginia, and we were out doing some work out there, and we walked into a bar and got to meet us a couple of Dixiecrats that didn't appreciate my Hispanic buddy being there. And it's so true when you talk about there's sort of this thread of Dixiecratism that runs through at least a certain sect of these conservative people, and they have no idea. What I think is what's interesting is like they have no idea, and I'm not speaking for all conservatives obviously, but I mean there's a big chunk of them that have no clue how bigoted they really come across.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about I read something the other day, and maybe it was about politics, or maybe it applied to something totally different. But no, I think it was John Cleese. It was John Cleese talking about the American political system, or about people in general, and he said, the problem is that, if you can't appreciate how good of a composer Mozart is unless you're an amazing composer.
Right.
You can't appreciate how good of a piano player Beethoven was unless you're a good piano player, and you can't understand how horrible you are at guitar, unless you have the guitar skills to understand how horrible you are,
Right.
And we're in that situation, like from a social education and like an academic education standpoint, where I think a lot of these people have no fucking clue just how they're just, and I've had these discussions with people, that say things like, I don't see race, and I was raised in a household where, my mom, God bless her, I mean, she's like the sweetest, most big-hearted person in the world, and we just weren't raised, whether you were black, white, brown, or anything in between, like it wasn't a factor, and you were welcome in her home as if you were one of her own kids. And so I was raised thinking that race wasn't a thing, and I genuinely believed that. Yeah. And dating a black girl and being in love with a black girl, I've learned this whole other side of things that's really helped me understand that race wasn't a thing for me. It wasn't in my house, and it isn't for a certain few people, but for people of color and for minorities and for gay people who are raised in a situation where it's everything. It shapes your worldview. It shapes your self-perception. It shapes your self-acceptance. And this is where I think, when we say the word bigoted, I never even understood that word until a couple years ago. Because if you don't resonate with that, if you don't see yourself as a bigot, then it doesn't make any sense. But to me, bigotry is just like, it's the inability to exercise or express compassion for another person's worldview, for another person's struggles and challenges that they go through. And it's sort of, are you familiar with Ben Shapiro at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, in a lot of ways, I'm a big Ben Shapiro fan. I'd imagine that you're probably not. But one of the problems I've got with him is this complete lack of compassion for other human beings in general. And I think that's where the bigotry thing has really hit me the last couple of years of trying to look at things differently, and I've gravitated socially left more than I thought I would. And that's again, like you said, I think we're seeing a two-party system that's breaking up from the Bernie and Hillary thing, which was a complete clusterfuck that never should have happened.
I agree.
If nothing else, Bernie seems like a legit, good dude to me. He seemed like he wanted to do good for people.
He'd had my vote, and had he won, he certainly would have had my vote.
What happened? What happened there? I don't know. I don't follow this shit, man. I don't even vote. I'm against it.
Well, so definitely the DNC, the establishment, wing of the Democratic Party wanted Hillary to win. That's obvious, right? I mean, I think we've seen enough news stories now that credibly back up the fact that the system was tilted in favor of Hillary Clinton, right? And she was the establishment pick. She was the establishment pick even against Trump. I mean, she like fivefold in money, right? Like she brought way more money to the table in terms of donations, campaign donations, than Trump did. But I think had it been Bernie and Trump, Bernie would have won, right? Because he had that grassroots energy behind him that Hillary just didn't have. And look, I mean, I saw Trump early on for what I think he is, which is a very dangerous, very narcissistic man with no empathy, no feelings for anyone other than himself. So I'd have voted for like over Donald Trump.
Have you? Are you a Sam Harris fan at all?
No.
Okay,
no.
So Sam Harris is a UCLA neuroscientist. He's one of my heroes. I love him, and he's a philosopher. He's one of the great philosophers of our day. Yeah. And whenever we get done here today, if nothing else, go check out Jordan Peterson and check out Sam Harris. They've both been all over Rogan. I don't know if you watch Joe Rogan's podcast much, but Jordan Peterson's Peterson is big right now in the philosophical community. He's He's a University of Toronto professor of psychology.
Okay.
And he got into trouble about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, because in Canada they're passing hate speech laws.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, you can get in trouble for, it's compelled speech. I mean, they're forcing you to say certain things.
Right.
And to be very clear, I mean, I believed at the bottom of my heart that Jordan Peterson doesn't have a bigoted bone in his body, right? I believe that he loves trans people and gay people and black and white and everybody as much as anybody else. But he's called a racist and a transphobe and everything else, because he's one of the most historically educated human beings I've ever heard in my life, and he understands that there's a progression to tyranny that is real. There's a roadmap to tyranny that can be followed and understood with the proper historical education.
Right.
And when he saw that compelled speech being initiated in Canada, he said, "No, I'm not going to refer to a person by any word that you tell me I must use." Right.
Yeah.
If I'm friends with a person and they prefer to be called G or Jem or Zobi or whatever pronoun, then I'll do that because I want to, because I'm a courteous person. Anyway,
but not going to be forced to do it.
Not going to be forced to do it because, and he provides the roadmap, and he shows you, like, historically, they've done this. They pass laws, then they do this, then they do this, and there's a playbook to this. Anyway, I say all this because Peterson and Sam Harris, although sort of are sort of rivals in the philosophical community in a lot of ways, because Sam is much more, as I would say, a left-brain material empiricist type of dude. And Peterson is much more on the balance of understanding masculine and feminine principles and the compassion versus the self-regard and stuff. But Sam Harris said something about Trump that I wanted to read to you because I love it. And he's I'll do my best deadpan Sam Harris impression when I do this. But he says, "There is never a moment when I find Trump persuasive. When I look at him, I see a man without any inner life. I see the most superficial person on earth.
Yeah.
This is a guy who has been totally hollowed out by greed and self-regard and delusion."
Yeah.
And that's what you just described.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect description for him. I sometimes wonder if he's even aware of other people around
that
him.
They exist.
Are they simply figments in his mind, figments of his imagination? And it's dangerous, people like that, because they're going to surround themselves with sycophants, yes men, yes women, that they're going to tell him what he wants to hear. He's gotten rid of a lot of the adults in the room. If you look at the,
he drained the swamp, bro.
Yeah, he did. He drained it of any responsibility. It's a free for all, man. It's beyond.
I'll be honest, man. So I'm kind of a wacko in a lot of ways politically, and I didn't know what to think of this Trump thing when it was happening, in the lead up to this, and I just thought, are you a Game of Thrones guy? You don't strike me as a Game of Thrones guy. Are you really?
Yeah, watch it a bit, but
you seem like you're way above that. Okay, you're way too mature for that shit. You wear collared shirts, man. I just, they in Game of Thrones, they've got all these families that are always feuding, and it's the same cycle that repeats itself, and this whole hierarchical system that's in place. Yeah. And along comes this little girl with some dragons, and she says, "I'm not here to, to stop the wheel. I'm here to break the wheel."
Right.
And I thought Trump. I don't know him. I don't know anything about him because why would I? I don't watch reality TV, and I'm not into narcissistic billionaires.
Right.
But I thought, fuck, if nothing else, he's the first guy to come along and fund himself and get elected, and maybe he has his own greedy, self-serving ends, but maybe he's going to accidentally break the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm really disappointed.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. A buddy of mine told me early on, he said, "Man, Trump is the insider's insider." And I was like, man, I don't think so. I think he's gonna accidentally fuck things up enough that they're gonna start working again. It's kind of like shocking a heart back to life. There's not a whole lot of precision in that science. It's just deliver a massive shock to the organ and it starts working.
Right.
No.
Yeah, I don't see it.
I don't see it happening.
he's governed like a typical Republican, right? And it's been supply side economics, tax cuts for folks that just frankly don't need it, and cuts to vital programs, and you have all of that. Yeah, but you had that during the George Bush years. You had that during the Ronald Reagan years too. But at least in those years, what you had was some sort of dignity. You didn't have tweets at 3 o'clock in the morning.
The tweets are my favorite, though, man. Oh, well, no, I can't even say that with a straight face. They were in the beginning.
Yeah, no, I mean, in fairness, I 100%, 100%.
You'd be out of work if Trump shut down his Twitter account, bro. Your Instagram page would fucking go away.
It would go away. It would dissolve in a matter of days. Yeah, I mean, he is comedy brilliance. Like one of the people that follows me on there, and I won't. He prefers to remain anonymous, so I won't mention his name. But he's a very successful stand-up comedian, and he assumes this persona on my page or on his page, and he frequently comments on mine. And he said that Trump is bar none the greatest gift to comedians that has come along in American politics, ever, right? Because he's so unintentionally comedic, because he's constantly in this rage-filled, obsessive narcissism that just is unrelenting. And it's funny, in terms of like personalities, is a quick story. So I knew somebody that actually met. It was a girl that I knew quite some time ago, but she was in teaching, and she actually met Bill Clinton. Right, so she was on a reception line, greeting line, and she was an attractive gal, and he immediately gravitated towards her. And she told me, so I can 100% understand the stories that I hear about Bill Clinton with women, because he had that sort of magnetism, right?
I've heard that about him, even from men.
He enters the room, and it's like people are just drawn to him magnetically. And I think, in my mind, Trump is like the opposite of that. Like if Clinton is the sun, right? Trump's like a black hole.
Well, it's like, it's like if my girlfriend sees a mouse in the room, she is automatically like on the opposite side of the house on the roof.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like if Trump walked into a room, like did you see that video? I think I tagged you in that video on Instagram where like there was a classroom, like a kindergarten class that Trump walked into,
kids.
And the kids all shit themselves and started screaming.
Yeah, because he's just this bully, and he has that sort of hyper aggressive personality trait, and everybody, and all the stories that come out, they're fascinating stories, but all these stories that come out of the White House that say that it's just such a toxic work environment. Like, he is such a toxic human being that working around him is like working around radioactive material, right? Like, after a while you just get cancer.
My girlfriend has a saying she got somewhere that I love, and it's been applied so many times in my life, and she says authenticity is magnetic.
Yeah.
So if he's the opposite of authenticity, then he's like a walking repellent to other human beings, and I can't imagine being immersed in that. Talk about a toxic work environment every single day.
I can't. I mean, and I think he manages to be successful because he's just willing to operate in without any regard to consequence. He seems to have no sense of causality in his actions.
That's the part that scares me, man, because at a point I've got to, ask myself, like, is he doing this stuff with any awareness of any consequences? And then if he's not aware of any consequences, it can't be out of a total lack of access to that knowledge. And then it's like, no, he's doing it out of a complete irreverence for the consequences. And then it's like, what does he know that we don't? You know what I mean? Like, I had conversation with a guy the other day, and I'm not saying that I subscribe to this belief. In fact, I told him outright that I don't. But I mean, it's almost like, he said that we're being primed for an invasion by Russia or something like that. Yeah. And it's like, you almost got to go like, what else could it be? Because if we see what's going on, it's a total shit show. And he doesn't care.
Yeah.
How's that possible?
I have no idea. It's unreal. It's unlike any other human being that I've ever, seen. Now, I've never met him. I only know him 2 dimensionally. through the persona, the character that he plays, right?
That's him. That's him, man.
Yeah,
He's become that character.
I think he is. He's 100% that that individual. But yeah, I think he operates in a way without any regard to consequence whatsoever. He's totally me focused. He's like a shark.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a shark. If the shark stops swimming, it drowns. And if he stops focusing on himself and what this means for himself and how does this impact himself, then he has nothing else, right? And now what I will give him credit for is he's probably one of the most brilliant marketeers and showmen ever, right? Like he could be a cult leader, and in a way he kind of is.
He kind of is, and there's another guy named Scott Adams, and Scott Adams is the creator of Dilbert, the comic.
Oh, yeah.
And very, very smart guy, and he's a trained hypnotherapist. And I guess you could call him like a political philosopher or something like that. I mean, the guy is really pretty impressive intellectually.
Yeah.
And he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's been on Sam Harris's podcast. Now, Sam Harris, again, this neuroscientist philosopher guy that I like so much, he's very anti-Trump, and I think you'd really appreciate at least 98% of what he says and talks about on his podcast. But he had Scott Adams on, and they went head to head. Scott Adams is a Trump supporter, and I had to hear it because I'm like, how does someone with this level of intelligence, who's actually a sincere person, because you can be as smart as you want. If you want to be insincere, you can support anybody.
Sure.
But Scott Adams has always struck me as a sincere dude. But his take on Trump is absolutely fascinating, and I encourage you to go check it out.
Okay.
Because he left Sam Harris confused. At the end of the podcast, Sam's like, I'm still not totally sure how we even disagree. Yeah. It's like, this guy's a hypnotherapist. I'm not sure if he put me under or what, but he's like, we talked for 3 hours, and I still can't nail down why we disagree, but he's so pro-Trump, and I'm so anti-Trump. And the talk was so fascinating from a psychological analytic standpoint. But what Scott Adams seems to talk about is, regardless of the policy and all that, because he has his own views that I'm not really equipped to express properly, but he's like, what you just said, he's a marketeer, and he's like, this guy knows how to get shit done. Yeah. And you can walk into a room and you just use these short little words and short phrases that are power phrases that encourage people, that get people around them, and it's the cult leader thing like you're talking about. And I'm not saying that anyone here who voted for Trump is in a cult, and I'm not saying that you're not, but but the when you look at the way that he presents himself, and again, Scott Adams being a trained hypnotherapist, he said, like it or not, as a hypnotherapist, I know how to get inside your mind. That's what a hypnotherapist does. And he's like, Trump gets it way more than any of you guys realize. You know, it's hard for you and I to sit here and say, well, because at first I was thinking, well, like, he's playing chess, not checkers. And then I started paying attention, and I'm like, no, he's behaving like an angry toddler with a Twitter account. Yeah. But according to Scott Adams, the reality is, he may just have this particular mental configuration that makes him great at being able to manipulate the simpler minded through his own simple minded sort of mechanisms or whatever. I don't know.
And I think he's also a byproduct of some really fortunate tailwinds behind him, right? Like, I think there's an undercurrent in this country where the country is changing, and I've written a lot about this in the stuff that I put up on my site, and it's one of the central themes, right? So, coming out of the 2008 recession, there's a whole slice of the country that never really recovered, right? And it's that blue collar, manufacturing base, the kind of heartland of the country, and we're right at this tipping point as a country where we're becoming more urban than we are rural. Right, in terms of where the population is centered, we're becoming browner than we are whiter. We're becoming, more atheist and agnostic, and not anti-religious, but maybe just apathetic to it than we are, Christian Protestant. Right, so we're right at this sort of inflection point, and I think there's a lot of people this is only my opinion, right? For whatever it's worth, but I think there's a lot of people very angry about a changing of the guard, about a changing of a power structure in this country from a traditional, white male patriarchy into this new what we're going to be. And I personally think everything's going to be fine. I'm not one that's fearful of this sort of dystopian future when we're a browner America than we are a whiter America. I think everything is going to be fine. But I think there's a large percentage of the population that doesn't believe that. And here comes Trump, more than willing to scapegoat and say, Mexicans are rapists and carrying drugs and crime, and, willing to say all Muslims are terrorists, and willing to say a lot of really controversial things that they wanted to hear. These people
I didn't really think about it that way. Yeah, no, that's a good point, because you're right. I mean, even me as a white male being, pretty, I could think of myself as pretty open-minded and a pretty positive guy. And, I care about everybody, and I certainly don't consider myself a bigot or a racist or anything else. But I have picked up and sometimes am perturbed by a lot of the, I guess what I feel like is sort of an unequal tolerance for, racial slurs and stuff like that. Like, it seems like it's an okay time to attack the white male. It is. And I don't for 1 minute, and it's hard to even say that without being taken out of context, because in the same breath, I'm the first one to say that we are built on an oppressive white male patriarchy.
Right.
No question about it. But again, this goes back to, maybe my upbringing by my mom of this sort of, we all just need to love each other and get along thing. Yeah. And it's sort of a utopian thing. But, it goes back into sort of this Jordan Peterson philosophy, which is why I was so attracted to him when I found him a year and a half ago, is this idea of individual responsibility. Yeah. This idea that if we all of us woke up one day and decided to become tolerant and become open-minded and become compassionate, that the world's problems would work themselves out pretty quickly. Sure. So when I see people, especially on social media, it became a real burden for me to deal with for a while, because I would just see these pages that had 200,000 or 300,000 followers make a post, and you've got 3,000 or 4,000 comments in there, and it's just everyone's bashing especially white men, and talking about white privilege and saying, these guys had everything handed to them and this and that. I come from a family of blue collar entrepreneurs. My dad's an auto mechanic. My granddad's a construction worker. My brother's a steel worker. And we've all, we're all entrepreneurs that started our own business at some point and worked our asses off to have anything that we do have. And it certainly wasn't handed to us. But it's very short-sighted to say all that and then not also say that, I didn't have to face some of the challenges that I would have had I been born of a different skin type or whatever. And so I guess that's sort of the racial thing. I think you're right. I mean, everybody panicked when they sensed that things were changing. Yeah. And Trump, like he said, he kind of rode in on that wave and said, "Have no fear, I'll fuck this whole thing up for everybody." And he did just that. And I think, like, for me, and why I thought this talk would be, and has been, and will continue to be, such a good discussion, is because, we don't have to be all about attacking one group or another. We don't have to have this binary viewpoint. It's about thinking for yourself and thinking critically and analyzing shit on your own and saying, I don't have to be one of 3,000 comments in this and attack people just because it triggers an emotional reaction. Because at the end of the day, what my view is, like, what is the purpose of everything that we're trying to do? If you're going to spend 2 minutes typing out a comment on Instagram, are you just trying to participate in an angry echo chamber? Or are you trying to convey a thought that may inspire someone to look at things differently? And obviously you're trying to get them to your side of the argument, but attacking people is not the best way to do it. And if you're holding on to an argument, hopefully it's for good reason, And I think Trump fucks that whole thing up a lot. He polarizes things so much, it makes it difficult to do that.
Yeah, he does, right? And that's tough because we have become, like, so polarized. I think any kind of discussion between people of different political philosophies is almost impossible, right? Because everybody has this like sense of embedded tribalism that we have to win. It's a zero-sum game. My win is your loss, and I. And I can't claim any high road, right? Because I certainly have a left of center, political belief, and I'm very outspoken. I can be, rather. I can throw a fair amount of snark, right into the
Oh yeah,
content.
you're a full-blown asshole at least 25% of the time.
Oh, at least, yeah, and that's probably being generous, So I have to constantly remind myself too, because it can get emotional, it can get passionate. Like I have to think about like, why did I actually start this page, and what was the intent, and what was the purpose of it, right? And the intent and the purpose of it was to try to get people to care about politics and to get engaged in the political process, right? To become activists, even if they want to become an activist for the GOP,
Yep.
right? And it's tough. You have to continually remind yourself to cool down, to become a little dispassionate, and to try to talk to somebody whose points of view you differ with in a way that's rational. And it is very difficult because politics has become this sort of blood sport, and the media participates in it. They love it, right? They love us in these little groups, right? Because it makes for sensationalism, and that sells advertisements on.
Well, I had to turn, I guess right around the time of the election, I gave it one last go, and I've got a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old, and that's their age now, and I was so blown away by the polarity between the news networks that I pulled my kids in the living room and I said, "All right, guys, we're going to turn on the TV and we're going to watch Fox News this week, nothing but Fox News, and then in a week we're going to turn on MSNBC or CNN for a week." And we did this practice for about 6 weeks. And my kids sat in the living room in awe. And you would think that at that time a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old could give a shit,
Yeah.
But even my 6-year-old was just blown away by the disparity between the presentation of facts and the conclusions that you draw from them. Because when you start altering facts, I mean, the conclusions can go haywire. They can go anywhere they want to go. And that was when I turned the news off pretty much for good. It was like at this point we are being given God knows what level of accuracy in our information, and it becomes just a big hate mongering contest, and which is when your page became so honestly so important to me, because it gave me the information, it gave me the humor, it gave me a well presented view, and that I don't always agree with you, we've definitely disagreed. But Jesus, being able to disagree with someone cordially, who's ever heard of that? Especially in this day and age,
Yeah.
You look at things. So there you go. So Fox News.
Yeah.
Good news network or the best news network?
In my opinion, it's funny. Like non-prime time, right? In my opinion, Fox News is a legitimate news organization. So from 9 o'clock a.m., whenever the morning kind of, Fox and Friends hour ends, up until, 5 o'clock when the evening broadcasting resumes, in my opinion, in those hours, it's a legitimate news organization.
Really?
And yeah, I think so. Now, the challenge that I believe they have is they blend that line after 5 o'clock and they go into their opinion, and there's no perception of when did news stop and when did opinion begin. Because when you get into Hannity, when you get into Tucker Carlson,
that's the thing. I've had a long-standing Zen blockage with Bill O'Reilly for a long time, and I know he's not there anymore. But which is would be fabulous if I wasn't confident that they were just going to backfill him with another troll that was just as bad.
They have.
But between he and Hannity, I mean, they fuck with my Zen too much, man. I can't do it. I like watching Rachel Maddow, or used to, because I just love how passionately infuriated she gets, and I disagree with her 90% of the time on her views. But it's hard to disagree with anybody who hates Trump 90% of the time. You know what I mean? Right. the numbers don't. You're a numbers guy. That doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So I used to just love watching her just get completely exasperated and just being like, I can't. I don't know. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you have the cadence pretty good there. Yeah. That's exactly what she does.
The look on her face. I want to take her to coffee. I just want to have a conversation with her.
But you see the same thing on MSNBC, right? So that skews and feeds a liberal point of view that's sort of reaffirming that same echo chamber. So I think one of the most dangerous things that Trump has done as president of the United States is start the phenomena of fake news, of like not starting fake news, because we had opinion journalism long before,
but creating that mantra to rally around.
Yeah. And so we've entered into this like post-truth phase, right? And in my opinion, there's a danger to that, because you don't have a North Star. You don't have anything solid to hold on to. If nothing is fact, then everything is
up for grabs.
Everything's up for grabs. Everything is opinion. And it's just who shouts the loudest, right? And that just creates this sort of, revolver of polarity and anger. And it's just this it's a spiral. It's a constant, and probably a downward spiral in terms of, our national dialogue and our ability to see eye to eye. Because if you actually go into some of the issues, the left and the right aren't that far apart on a lot of stuff, right? Like you saw this with the gun debate, right? When you actually laid out, what's reasonable, 80% of what the left wants and 80% of what the right wants is the same thing. Right. And yet you can't have that debate around it, because, the far right pulls it so far right, and then the far left, pulls it so far left. Like one thing that John Paul Stevens, the retired Supreme Court justice, came out and said, it's time to outlaw the Second Amendment. And I'm like, oh, really?
That's not a good move.
That's not a good move, right?
It's not even a good thing to say or to think.
Right. Because all you're doing is feeding that, kind of paranoia on the fringe of the far right, that feel they need their guns.
Well, now they've got a meme. Now they've got a meme to put up, and that's one of the things I've noticed. So, like, I'm a huge Stephen Colbert fan. I've been a huge Stephen Colbert fan for 10, 13, 14 years. I got to meet him. I went to
he's great.
Oh, he's amazing. I went to one of his shows about a year and a half ago with my girlfriend, and we got sat in the front row. And,
nice.
And I got a chance to meet him. I just love him to death. But I had to turn even him off, along with all the rest of TV, because comedy is important. We got to be able to make jokes and be able to laugh about stuff. Again, one of the reasons why I love your page. But also what can happen is that you can make jokes about something that's really important, and if you're not careful, or even if you do it intentionally, you can give people something to rally around that can become really toxic and can really take hold. And it's like what you're saying, for just someone. We live in a place in time where you've just got to be so fucking careful about what you say,
right?
Because the polarity that's going on, and someone like that, who the guy you're talking about who made that comment, it's like you just fueled the fire so much, and gave people a meme to rally around. And a term that I use a lot on the podcast and on my platform is building bridges of understanding. Bridges of understanding, and that's not a bridge building tactic. You know what I mean? And
that's a bridge burning tactic.
That's a bridge burning tactic. That's burning the bridge in a big way. I'm gonna jump over to some specific stuff that I'm interested in your take on, because I've seen you post stuff about this, and I've already told you multiple times. I just turn the shit off, so I don't even follow it. But let's go. Stormy Daniels, Russia collusion, Russian hookers peeing on me. The last one's not really that big of a problem in my book, but
I don't have a problem with it either. I think it's hilarious.
No, I keep telling my girlfriend it's totally natural. The president does it.
Exactly, he did it. Yeah,
he did it. Whatever Trump. Yeah, and then he fucked it up by wanting to throw missiles at Syria. She's like, "Well, would you throw missiles at Syria?" And I'm like, "Well, no." She's like, "Well, I'm not going to pee on you." So anyway, thanks a lot,
all
Trump.
screwed up.
Yeah, but the Russia thing. So I have seen a lot about like the Uranium One thing with Hillary. So to put it out there just because I have to, and we don't need to get off on this, but like I could see Bernie being a good guy, you know. Hillary Clinton, in my book, in as much as Trump may be a great big empty shell of ego and narcissism, I mean she strikes me as one of the most evil, toxic, fake human beings in the world. That's sort of my view.
That's your view? Yeah, I think she's a corporatist. You know, I mean, she's a centrist Democrat. She's a war hawk, right? She would have perpetuated the same cycle that Trump doesn't seem to be able to break so far, which is this endless cycle of war in the Middle East, which I'm totally against, right? I think it's just we're trading blood for oil, and it's a tremendous waste of time. But she is the system. She wouldn't have changed that, right? The system could have counted on her to perpetuate that. I think most of and again, this is just, my opinion.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But, most of the conspiracy, or the theories around that, like the Benghazi conspiracy, the Uranium One conspiracy. If you really unpack the facts,
that's what I was going to ask you about, was like, measuring up the Trump Russia collusion versus like the Uranium One thing, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's night and day. Like, I mean, a lot of it on my page, some of the comments will be, what I call like whataboutism, right? Which is, well, what about this? What about Hillary Clinton's involvement in that? And I try to respond. I almost said the word attack, and I stopped. I try to respond to it in a way to say, first of all, Hillary Clinton's not relevant anymore. She's a grandmother and a book publisher living in upstate New York, right? She's not running this, cabal of Illuminati, pulling the strings behind the curtains of power, of the power corridors in America. She's a grandmother, right? She had her chance. She blew it. She was not, she's not warm, not magnetic, not somebody that people could rally behind, not inspirational. And she paid the price for it and lost an election. She should have won, clearly. Because, I mean, let's be honest. She was running against Donald Trump, who was insulting everybody he could find, right? Besides white men, right? Like, he attacked almost every other demographic group in the country. He attacked women, attacked minorities of all stripes, attacked, a war widows, the Gold Star families, right? Like, just unbelievable, like what he would do without his filter and his scripting. But anyway, back to your point.
I particularly love grabbing women by their pussies. I feel like that was the strongest campaign, thing that came out. I feel like that might have cinched the election for him right there. Yeah, I still don't understand how anything ever happened with him after that came out.
I don't get it either. And
I've never even thought those words in my life, and I can be a total chauvinistic ass, I'm sure, in my private time with my guys, and I've talked about this with some of the raunchiest of my buddies, who send me memes and stuff that they would never even say out loud. You know what I mean? The guys that are known for the dirty jokes, like the really bad shit, and we all just shook our heads and went, "This motherfucker got elected, and he said that, and he thinks that."
Yeah,
it's remarkable.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I'll come back to your question in a bit, but if I could just deviate for a second.
Sorry, man. I don't take my Adderall anymore, so I'm hard to keep on track.
No, because I actually want to go back to that. Talk about the Russia collusion thing too. But the grab by the pussy incident, it was mind-boggling to me. I think that's just the world he operates in. Those are the kind of women he hangs out with. Yeah, that he can obviously buy. You look at Stormy Daniels, look at Karen McDougal, right? Beautiful women that have obviously traded their looks for money, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? Stormy Daniels is a porn star, and Karen McDougal was a Playmate of the Year, right? They're beautiful women that know they're beautiful. Okay, they're not oblivious.
They capitalize on that.
And they capitalized on it, right? And that's the world he lives in, and he buys these women. And I think he looks at women as purely a transaction. It's
about like everything else.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so, grab him by the pussy is just another part for the course. But what did it for me at an emotional level, a gut level, and this is a meme that I post again and again and again and again and again. I'm the father of a special needs child. And when he went up and he did that arm movement and he was talking about a New York Times reporter, Serge Kovalevsky, who has a handicap that basically deforms one of his arms. It kind of has this sort of crippled look to it. He can't straighten his hand out. He completely functional, brilliant writer in every other regard. He wrote a story about debunking one of Trump's lies about people in New Jersey, Muslims in New Jersey, cheering the fall of the Twin Towers on 9/11. Right? He perpetuated that story as a part of his Muslim bashing, building up to his campaign. Same thing he was doing to Obama with the whole Arthur conspiracy. Right? That stuff that's just right out of Roger Stone's Dirty Tricks playbook. And Serge called him on it. Right, and wrote an article in the New York Times, which is, as much as Trump bashes on it, it's, a paper that he really respects and reads because it has a voice of authority. And he said, bullshit, there were no Muslims gathered by thousands that were cheering for the fall of the buildings in New Jersey. You just made that up to, scapegoat a population of people because you thought it would be politically expedient to do so. Mm-hmm. And he made, anyway, so point being, he made fun of him in that instance on stage. And as the father of a special needs child, right, like, you bullies do that, right? Like, and there's just like an emptiness.
Child bullies.
Yeah, like there's
not
just
grown-up bullies.
Not like you would not expect that behavior from you would scold your 13-year-old.
It would be a very poor, an unacceptably ill-mannered behavior for an 8-year-old bully. As a teacher, if you saw an 8-year-old behaving that way, you would want to call the parents in and instruct them on how to better parent their child.
Yeah, exactly, right. And this is a 70-year-old man doing it. And I got to tell you, with the connection that I have as a special needs parent, right? Like, if I were at that rally and he'd have done that, I'm not 100% sure I wouldn't have rushed the stage. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't have gotten to the stage, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure. Like, so for me, that was the moment where I wasn't gonna. Now, to be honest, I wasn't gonna vote for him anyway, going into that point. Right?
You don't say.
But that's when I knew. I'm like, this man is. He's
a sociopath.
He's a sociopath. He's a complete piece of shit. He's a complete piece of shit. And in my opinion, right, like, he just has no redeeming value. And that was the point where I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to express myself around this. I made my page, at that point, pretty political. But I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No. You're good, man. You're good. You're totally good. Like I said, I stopped taking my Adderall about a year ago after taking it every day for 12 years, and trying to keep a fucking conversation going in a linear fashion with me is just, somebody's got to keep it on track because I'm not the one. But I do want to circle back to the Russian collusion thing because
sure.
Uranium One. I mean, the Benghazi thing is a whole different story. That's just too much to get into, I think. But, again, being separated from the media because, like you said, it got to a point where, what's even true anymore? Where do you want to get – which flavor of bullshit do you want? Because it just can't all be real. So I just threw in the towel and said never mind. But just looking at your page, and I've got this really not so much on my podcast page, but on my personal page, which is I hardly use much, but it's a little more political. My podcast page is a lot more spirituality and philosophy and stuff and science and all that. But on my personal page, I've got a really gnarly feed now and have for the last year or so of a lot of right-wing and a lot of left-wing pages. So I get to kind of just sit there and peruse both sides and laugh and shake my head. So your take on the and by the way, you're on the podcast, not someone else, because your views tend to be the ones that feel the most balanced to me. So that's the nature of that. So that's why I want your opinion on the in brief, as much as you want, Russia collusion and Uranium One. Those two things in particular, and you're right. I mean, regardless of what I think of Hillary Clinton, I mean, she's not really that relevant on the political stage, at least on the front lines anymore. So what does it matter, right? Like, what are we talking about? But I guess really just for my own edification and any one of my listeners, like, your view on the Uranium One deal. What is said about that? What do you think actually happened? and then the same thing as as the Russia collusion thing.
Yeah, so I'm much more versed on the Russia collusion thing than I am on Uranium One, just to be fully transparent.
Yep.
I haven't really dug in on Uranium One once I just saw it kind of debunked a couple of times. What I understand about it was a Canadian company came in and bought Uranium One. It had to be approved by a commission or a panel. Hillary Clinton sat on that commission or panel, had some influence over that. And then there was also perhaps some campaign contributions that came back after the fact, or maybe some donations through her Clinton Foundation that came in through after the fact. So there may have been like some pay for play, right? Do
you put it past her?
No, I don't. Right, and I think her running that Clinton Foundation was stupid.
Yeah.
As soon as she announced her intention to run for the presidency, the first time, not even the second time, but the first, she ran back in 2008. So she should have.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, she should have shut that down. They shouldn't have been doing that. It offered up too much opportunity because they're power players, right? They're a power couple, and it offered up too many opportunities for foreign governments to come in and try to buy influence. And it just, while I don't think the actual facts connect in the way of nefarious intent, it just looked bad. It made for easy clickbait style journalism on the right to say, we're selling 20% of our uranium to Russia. Now, what debunks that to me is, you could ask a simple question of, well, Russia has their own uranium, right? So what do they need 20% of our uranium for? Like what is the, show me the causality of that. And so when I've asked some of those questions of people that, post on my site, there's really no good answer for that.
Yeah. I don't have one. I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
But to me, this is, just to bring up a little point there that you just made, is this is sort of the type of research or investigative stuff that this is where my investigative research happens, is when I ask questions, I'll follow the answers, right? So I'll ask a question on my site and get responses from the left, responses from the right. Yeah. And I'll see which ones, by and large, seem like utter bullshit. Yeah. And then you move on to the other ones, and then you start to see a pattern. Well, like on this particular issue or this question, these particular people on the left are all saying things that make a lot more sense, you know? And then you follow that line of questioning, and eventually you hit the floor of the issue. You get down to the truth or whatever. And whenever you run out of answers that make any sense, that's kind of the end of that thread. And so I never got to the bottom of that rabbit hole with Uranium One. Kind of like you. I kept seeing it would get debunked from over here, and then over here they would make a lot of good points, and then you know what I mean. And eventually I just said, "Fuck it, this is just more fake news."
Yeah, I mean, is there something there? I mean, maybe but I don't see what the negative intent is. Now I could say the same to the Russia collusion, and that I am a lot more informed on. At least I'm informed.
Talk to me about that, because I'll give you my I'll expose the depths of my ignorance on that in about 10 seconds. Basically, there were some Russian people that paid for ad space on Facebook, and then there were on the back door side. Trump had lawyers and people that were working with the Russians to help coordinate this during the campaign. That's literally the extent of what I know, if that's anything at all.
Okay. Well. So what I know and what I followed, and I'll start first with everything that's actually been published, right? So this is fact as far as we can determine fact to be, right? It gets back into that.
If there is such thing as fact at this point.
Is exactly. So during the course of Trump's campaign, there has been at least 3 proven instances of collusion with Russia. One was a junior staffer that was on Trump's foreign policy team by the name of George Papadopoulos. He had contacts throughout the course of the campaign as a part and parcel of his being on Trump's foreign policy team. He had contacts with a professor in London who has been, it has been said through our intelligence community, had contacts in the Kremlin, right, and was acting as a front to the Kremlin for some information that they had on Hillary Clinton that could be disparaging to her campaign. That was instance number one. George Papadopoulos has admitted to lying to the FBI. He actually accepted a plea, pled guilty, and is now cooperating with Robert Mueller's special counsel.
That's your buddy, right?
What's that?
That's your buddy, right? Robert Mueller?
Robert Mueller, yeah.
You're a big Robert. Do you have a Robert Mueller jersey hanging up in your closet? I want you to show me your closet right now.
I would think, yeah, I probably do. Maybe I've got like a picture of him with some hearts around it or something.
With you superimposed, getting a kiss on the cheek or something. I would think.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people are probably in that same position, though. It's okay, man.
Yeah, Robert Mueller fan page or something. But yeah. So the second instance is that Trump Tower meeting, right? So Paul Manafort, his campaign chairman at the time, Don Jr., and the son-in-law. I'm forgetting. I don't know why.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, the son-in-law.
Yeah, Jared Kushner.
Yeah, I was going to say Derek Jeter, but
yeah, exactly.
Same syllables, different guy. I assume different guy. They're both from New York.
They took a meeting with a lawyer. They knew in advance that lawyer had contacts at the Kremlin, and they were told that the purpose of the meeting was to receive dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, both of those instances are violation of campaign finance law, right? So a crime was committed, right? And the campaign finance laws are pretty specific. They state that you can't get material gain, and that material can be information, not just money, from foreign sources throughout the course of the campaign. So the right thing to do in both of those instances would have been to alert the FBI, and they didn't. Well,
let me ask you right there. Is there an argument to be made from the other side, I don't know, about whether or not the definition of material gain really does span out to, intelligence versus money? Is that an argument that's made or no?
Or
is that pretty well established?
It's pretty well established within the definition of the campaign finance laws, right? But you could certainly make that argument, right?
I just asked because I assume we're dealing with some pretty slimy characters here, and I assume that argument would probably be made if it could be.
Yeah, I'm sure that argument is going to be made, right, at some point in time. And then the other instance was Roger Stone colluding with what now has become known as a Russian agent, this Guccifer 2.0, who hacked the DNC emails, right? So they were having back channel communications through Twitter that set Roger up to advise Trump on the dumping of these DNC emails that created a lot of the hysteria around what Hillary Clinton did in terms of colluding with the DNC and, kind of anointing herself as, the de facto appointee of or the de facto nominee for the Democratic Party. So I think those were instances where, we had pretty clear evidence of collusion, right? So one of the things that I saw Hillary give a speech about that was really illuminating for me was that within, everybody remembers the Access Hollywood tapes and the Grab 'em by the Pussy incident, right? What a lot of people don't realize is that within 2 hours of that incident, the DNC emails, the hacked emails dropped, right? So they had the first WikiLeaks drop within 2 hours of that incident,
wow.
Right? So that to me talks about an obvious coordination between the campaigns. So,
it's like if you've ever seen House of Cards with Kevin Spacey, or that movie or that show, one of my favorite shows, Boss, with Kelsey Grammer. It only went on for a couple seasons. Do you ever see that?
Oh yeah.
And you just it's an amazing behind the scenes look at how they coordinate these things. Like you can have a press conference going on, and in the middle of the press conference they release a sex tape or something, and it's the timing. It says a lot and it does a lot. Yeah. And you don't have those kinds of coincidences that just happen out of nowhere.
Yeah, and so anyway, so I think that's the evidence of the collusion, right? But and then But what I've also found interesting in like writing about it and investigating it, and I don't want to like oversell myself as some sort of investigative reporter, right? But just writing about it.
No, you're a nerd with too much time, just like I am.
Exactly. Is not really the collusion, right? First of all, collusion is not a crime. So that was like,
right,
illuminating for me. Like collusion is actually not a crime.
You're good.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 second. What?
Necessita tal shampoo.
Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, you're good, man. So collusion's not a crime.
So collusion is not a crime. Obstruction of justice is obviously a crime. So that's what I think. If anything is going to get, come back to Trump, it would probably be that. The firing of, the FBI director, the obvious attempts to try to cover up the nature of that meeting in Trump Tower. Those are the attempts to try to, stand in the way or obstruct justice. And that could potentially be a crime. I think, Mueller raiding his longtime personal
I was
going to
ask you about that next. I mean, what's your take on that? And what's that going to do?
Leverage. I think it's all just leverage. Every one of these people that have come under Mueller's thumb, right? Like the original, Flynn, right? The first national security advisor, Papadopoulos, Gates, who was Paul Manafort's, his campaign chairman's lieutenant. They've all essentially flipped and are now cooperating with the special prosecution. So they got him through leverage. They said, look, you can either cooperate with this investigation or you can go do 5 to 10 years in prison, right? What choice do you want to have? And I think that's what they're going to do with Cohen and Stormy Daniels, right? And they're going to basically say your payment of hush money to Stormy Daniels of $130,000 constitutes, again, a violation of campaign finance laws.
I heard they're allowed to give like $5,000 for hush money, which I think is funny that there's any amount of money that's like okay for hush money. It's like, you know what?
Okay.
If you nail a porn star, you can pay her $5,000. Like, what a pointless fucking law. Like, what porn star is going to be okay with $5,000 to keep her mouth shut? Like, they open it for a lot less.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's what they're going to try to do, right? They're going to try to turn Cohen, right, against him, and you can tell by his actions now, like
he's not happy.
He's talking about firing Rosenstein, right, who's basically Mueller's boss, right, at the Department of Justice. He's openly talking about Mueller being corrupt and but all of that is like just to kind of wrap the point up, right? All of that I think is window dressing. What's interesting is why would Russia try to influence the election? Why would they try to get behind Trump as vigorously as they have? Why is Trump so loath to say anything negative about Vladimir Putin? Loath to say anything. Why did he, not want to acknowledge what the intelligence communities were saying for so long about Russia hacking the election and influencing, votes and the Cambridge Analytica stuff and all the stuff that's come out now? Like, why is he so reluctant to address it? And I believe there is something there in terms of his finances, his personal finances, and his ties back to some very powerful people in Russia. His own sons are on record stating that a lot of the financing to run his businesses has come from Russian interests.
And one of the interesting things that I do happen to know, just because I'm fascinated with the inner workings of business magnates and stuff like that, is the way that Russian oligarchy works. When you're dealing, first of all, whether or not he's a failed businessman, he is a billionaire, and when you're working in the billions of dollars with Russian billionaires, these are guys who know Putin. There's really not a lot of ways around it. There's not a lot of billionaires in our country that don't know the president, but in Russia, I mean, Putin is an oligarch. He has
Yeah.
if you know much about him, I'm sure you do, but I mean, people,
Yeah.
I mean, the guy came to power, through an oligarchical system and
Yeah.
has always been criticized in Russia by his critics for handing out massive contracts funded by taxpayer money to his business buddies.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
dude's got
It's
a.
very
Have you ever
controlled
seen his
account.
mansion on the I think it's on the Baltic Sea, that badass mansion?
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to party there so bad.
Yeah.
I bet he throws hella
I'm sure.
parties.
I bet it'd be a good time. Yeah.
It's like
I bet it'd be a good time.
it's like a $2 billion mansion or something like that. But
That's crazy.
it
Yeah.
was given
Yeah.
to it was built with taxpayer money in secret, and the contracts were given to his business buddies to build that thing, and that's all.
Yeah.
That's all pretty well established stuff. But my point there is that just to go back to what you're saying, I mean, if Don Jr. and Jared Leto, I mean Jared Kushner, if they're confessing that money was coming from Russia. It doesn't take much of a leap to understand that money would be tied back to Putin and to Putin's cronies.
Yeah, it doesn't, and I think that's so. There's no smoking gun yet, right? So to give doubt to give doubt to the credibility of the conspiracy, right? So this would be the right's position. There's no there, and they're right. There is no smoking gun yet, right? All there is this sort of continual series of odd events and odd behaviors.
Anytime somebody lies, it's out of place,
Right.
And
Right.
like you said, you've already got people confessing on record that they've lied, and it's like, if there's no there, then why bother lying?
Why bother lying? Why hasn't he shown his tax returns? Why hasn't why is he so reluctant to criticize Vladimir Putin? Why isn't he more transparent with his business dealings? Why, if there is nothing there, why is he, raging at Bob Mueller and threatening to fire Rod Rosenstein? If there's nothing there, why is he acting like this? Even people in the, Republican Party are openly now starting to question, like, if you're innocent, act like you're innocent, right? Like, why are you acting this way if you're not trying to disguise something? So
my 7-year-old will sometimes go to the kitchen, and then he'll come out of the kitchen with his hands behind his back and like sneak with his back up against the wall and like scoot down the hallway, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? What do you got? And then it's never that he didn't go in there and get a candy bar.
Right.
It's never that. You know what I mean? If he goes in there and gets a banana or something, he comes walking out with a banana in his hand, and he's eating that shit right in front of us. But it's when he gets something he knows he's not supposed to, it's the hands behind the back, and he's scooting along the wall. And I feel like that's kind of what Trump is doing right now. So what do you see happening with this? I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm always connecting dots, and it's hard to do when you're staying out of the news as much as I have been for the last year. For the first time in my life, mind you. I've never stayed out of the news this much, but I like to connect dots. And when you look at what's going on with the Syria situation right now, and I'm a big believer that distractions are used as political tactics.
Sure.
Do you think there's anything going on there?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, like wag the dog, right? I mean, it absolutely could be used as an opportunity to distract the national attention from the Trump-Mueller investigation, the Russia investigation. I think all of that's going to out. I think it's all going to come out, right? There's too much critical mass, in my opinion, behind it right now for it to not fully out, right? So in my prediction is I think Trump's going to fire Rosenstein and he's going to fire Mueller. I think we will have.
What's the blowback going to be from that?
I think it's going to be a full-on constitutional crisis. I think there's going to be demonstrations in the streets over it. And I don't want to sound alarmist, but, Trump has shown nothing in his personality that would indicate otherwise that he is going to go quiet.
That he's capable of showing better judgment than to do that?
Yeah. And I hope that he doesn't, on his way out the door, call his supporters into, some sort of lather, right? And we reach this, sort of powder keg with, he's sitting there playing with matches over it, right? And we have a real incident. Like, look what happened in Charlottesville, right?
Yeah.
Now take something like that and magnify it 1,000 times, right? Because there are people on the left that are going to go out in millions, maybe even tens of millions, into the streets demonstrating if Mueller is fired, right? Because they'll think that justice has been usurped, and I see it happening. I see it happening, and I hope that the Republican Party, and I sigh as I say this, but I hope they can find the courage to do the right thing at a certain point if he does that, and stand him up for impeachment, because they hold all the power to do that, right? The Democrats have no power at all.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean,
it's got to be his party, or what? Or is it just because it's a Republican Congress?
No, just because it's a Republican Congress, right? So they would have all the control of the Judiciary Committee that would be necessary to start impeachment proceedings, and it would have to go into the Senate and a trial by the Senate. No one is actually. I think it's only one president that's actually been impeached. Bill Clinton that was removed from office due to impeachment, right? Or no president, excuse me. So Bill Clinton was impeached, but he was acquitted by trial in the Senate.
And then Nixon was impeached, but he resigned, right?
Yeah, exactly. He resigned. So would Trump resign though? Right? Like, if his back is against, like,
he's not a quitter, bro. He's not a quitter.
He's not, and he's a fire starter, right? Like, he would go out, and he's got a huge platform, right? He's got how many tens of millions of followers on Twitter, and a couple of strongly worded tweets. He could literally set the country on fire, and that's one of the things that I really worry about.
And this is one of the times that I'm proud to be a gun owning American.
yeah. If nothing, for protection of hearth and home, right?
Yeah. I mean, people go crazy, man.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate, and I hope it doesn't come to that. I pray it doesn't come to that. I hope cooler heads prevail. But I could see him. I could definitely see him doing something like that. But I don't think anything is going to stop the investigation at this point. I don't yet know whether or not he will actually be convicted of anything. I think the bar for convicting a sitting president is so high, right? That he's going to have to be caught red-handed, smoking gun in hand. It's just they're going to have him dead to rights. And even with as many people that are now cooperating witnesses with the investigation, I still don't think they would have the ability to actually criminally prosecute a sitting president, right?
Yeah.
So it will get to the point of can he actually just be removed, forced to resign, somehow impeached, something. And I think we're at that point, right?
So there's no out for him the way you see it. It feels like like you said, we've got the critical mass going to the point where that's probably this thing's not gonna. Yeah, no. Oh, and I've been wondering that too. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and again, I have no investment here. I'm not a Trump guy. I'm certainly very. I'm as anti-Hillary as I am anti-Trump. Bernie seemed like he had his heart in the right place. I, based on all of his charts and graphs and stuff, I question his the application of his logic. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sure. Sort of being a free market capitalist myself, and an entrepreneur from a family of entrepreneurs. Right. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is not. I'm not a huge Bernie fan, but if I had to pick between the three, I wouldn't have chosen Armageddon or Satan. And but
knowing what I know now, I'd have gone full throated for Bernie as well, right? Just because I think he would have won, right? Yeah. And so I think we meet there in the middle of that road for no other reason other than pragmatism.
Well,
right?
yeah, and also. Absolutely, and also, whenever I'm at a point in life, and the last couple of years, I've seen this. In a lot of ways, social media has whipped up a lot of bullshit, and it's created a lot of division, or enabled a lot of division. Social media itself doesn't create it, but it's empowered a lot of division. But also, what I've seen is, and I genuinely mean this, and I have seen this. I've talked to friends about this, but I've seen sort of a rising of the consciousness of people, and pockets of it that have grown together into bigger pockets and entire groups of people who have started to build these bridges of understanding. And You know, people who, even in my own family and extended family and people through work, even professional people who a few years ago would have been, you know, super anti-pot, for instance,
Right.
you know. And these people are starting to see, like, hey, they legalized it in several places and people aren't running around like it's reefer madness killing everybody.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
I know. Crazy, right? Like, it's ridiculous that we, tried to criminalize a plant. It's
So
just absurd.
if we didn't have who we have in place,
Yeah.
and you and I were to sit down and try to map out some policies that we met in the middle on,
Yeah.
you know, I would think that our stance on cannabis is probably similar.
Yeah. 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 I'd say 100%. Yeah. I mean, I would 100% legalize all of it. Honestly, I think, all we're doing is creating this like feedback loop of addiction to criminalization to incarceration to addiction to criminalization to incarceration, and it's just this repetitive cycle.
So you're not a big fan of the prison industrial complex either?
Oh God, no. And I think it absolutely targets the poor. It targets the disenfranchised. It targets minorities. It's horrific. I mean, I'm from Missouri, and about 5 miles from where I lived for like 5 years after graduating college was Ferguson, Missouri, and they've got police jurisdictions where you've got a dozen officers for 1,000 residents, and the ratio of officers to residents in most other cities is like 10,000 to 1, or 15,000 or 25,000 to 1, right? And you're living in a jurisdiction that's got 1,000 residents for every police officer, and they have to justify their budget, so they criminalize every jaywalking incident and every busted taillight, and all it does is create this like system of indentured servitude to the government, where these guys, they can never get off the dole, right? They can never, get out from under, they get arrested. They can't afford, any sort of representation. They get, fined out of the system. They can't afford the fine. Next thing they know, they put some sort of, penalty repayment plan on the fine. And now all of a sudden it's like, the police department is like Rent-A-Center, where you make 30 easy payments to get rid of your jaywalking violation. It's just ridiculous, right?
And this is
it's disrupted.
No, and I think that this to me sort of accentuates the bipolarity of the system again, because you've either got to be like anti-drug, like conservatives being like, anti-drug, anti all that stuff. Which means, therefore, that you support the whole prison industrial complex, you support over-policing, and you support the whole nanny state and all that. And then you have the opposite side. And so what you end up with, I think, is this inability for free-thinking people to have a place on the spectrum.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, when you make something illegal historically, during the Prohibition, when it was alcohol, what did you have? You had Al Capone. And you have these guys that come up. But the whole criminal world flourishes in times of prohibition, and now you have the cartels and all that stuff.
And it's savage, right? The brutality going on down there is just savage. I mean, we could drain the hateful energy out of that in a matter of months to years, right? Through legalization, right?
Yep.
I mean. I'm not talking about like making everybody heroin junkies. There's I'm sure there's other ways that
do you know how much heroin I do right now? Exactly as much as I want to.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And exactly as much as I'm going to do if it's legal. And I drink as much alcohol as I want to, which is whenever I occasionally feel like it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
because you're responsible for your personal choices, right? And honestly, the biggest pushers of heroin push it in a pill form and in forms of opioids that we're overprescribing for pain management, right?
And they're legal as shit.
And they're legal as shit. Yeah, they're legal as shit. That's the real dope pushers, right? Is Merck and Pfizer and and all those guys that are.
But these guys are funding the campaigns of pretty much everybody on both sides, right?
Oh, they are. And you know who the number one contributor to anti-marijuana legalization
It's got to be
initiatives
the tobacco companies, I guess.
Big Pharma.
Yeah. Oh,
Big Pharma.
yeah. Of course.
Big Pharma. Because they, they know that THC cannabis has these wonderful properties of pain management that is non-addictive, right? So fuck that, they can't have that, right? So let's get you on a Percocet or some other painkiller that's highly addictive and creates a better revenue stream for the company. So.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of psychedelics for depression and pretty much anything, just general well-being in life. But they've done studies now at like Johns Hopkins and NYU and Baylor, and they're finding numbers that you wouldn't believe. I mean, numbers that just sound like utter bullshit if I were to tell you. So you got to go look them up. But like 80% cure rate for people suffering from long-term depression after a single dose of psilocybin mushrooms.
Wow.
And these are numbers that just don't even make sense in the pharmaceutical world. You know what I mean? I mean, you're hoping for, even when you watch these commercials of the pharmaceuticals and stuff, they're like, it doesn't work for everybody, and it could have these 10,000 side effects. Your dick falls off. It's a bad deal. Yeah. And people have been using psychedelics for thousands of years in shamanic cultures all around the world, and you have to eat you have to eat more than your body weight in mushrooms to really do any damage. But again, they don't want healthy people. They want patients. I think that's been sort of a big part of my withdrawal from the political system over the last few years has just been this awakening to the realization that whoever, and this again goes back to my initial hope for the Trump regime, was like the big banks are going to fund both candidates. The pharmaceutical companies are going to fund both candidates. And again, it's this wheel that just keeps on going and going. And so I was hoping that he would break the wheel, and I think he's breaking a lot more than the wheel. But again, no, I'd like to see a whole policy system that was driven around a little less policing and a little less telling people what to do with things, which makes it difficult whenever you get into something, for instance, like healthcare, right? Yeah. Which is probably something where you and I have some disparity between us. Yeah. But it I won't lie. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to really pick your spot on the landscape when you're talking about healthcare, because I want to help people. I want to give. And we do try to help in different ways. But there are people that abuse the system too. Sure. And it's difficult. Difficult trusting this government or any government like it with my money and my charity. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's the difficulty for me. But again, that's the bipolarity that we're working with. Is do we leave all the poor and infirm out in the streets to deal with themselves? I don't think that's the answer either. The education system is another issue. And I think
it's the social safety net, right? It's like what are the social contracts? So I write about this a lot too. Like, what do we define as a social contract? What does it mean to be a citizen, right? Like, what do you get in exchange for being a citizen, right? Do you get some sort of basic access to healthcare? Do you get some sort of basic access to education in order to prepare you for a productive life? Do you get some sort of access to retirement benefits so that you can live out your golden years in some amount of peace and dignity? Do you get some sort of access to medical care in those golden years, right? That's the whole concept of the big deal, right? And the right, and this is really the Paul Ryan kind of wing of the right. I don't even think Trump really believes in this, but they've been trying to attack that New Deal since its inception, right? And they've been trying to embed this sort of libertarianism in terms of completely deconstructing that social contract. And my opinion on it is against that, right? But at the same time, I understand the right's perspective that there is too much, and too much coddling tamps down the spirit that we have as human beings to be productive and to make a better life for ourselves.
Really need to go look into some Jordan Peterson when we get done. You'd like it, because that's exactly it. Is it's the idea that we need to help each other, but at a point you start tamping down the spirit of people, that entrepreneurial, that pioneering spirit that made America what it was, which is why Trump's "Make America Great Again" slogan was so effective, because especially within his voter base, my grandparents, these are people who saw a different spirit among the population than what we see today. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing to see the depths to which we've fallen in a lot of ways. Yeah. Not that those guys were perfect, but no, what I want to do in the future with you is I want to talk more about the social contract, and it's been a badass talk, but I do in the future I want to bring you back in when you're not trying to enjoy yourself in Costa Rica, because the social contract is something I'm really interested in, because I'm a history nerd in as much as you're a political nerd. Yeah. That's my obsession, is looking, and particularly at the anthropology and the lifestyles of different cultures throughout history. Yep. And that's led me, like we talked about earlier, to bring it full circle, that humans are creatures of imitation. And like you traveling around the world gave you a lot of different perspectives to see different ways that things could be done. And, something, if I suggested a way of living to someone and they'd never seen that done, they think, well, that's crazy. That's foreign. That's alien to me. But if they lived in 10 different countries and they've seen it done that way, they go, well, yeah, maybe that's something we could try. Right. And in my view, one of the biggest failures of the educational system, and the most important, but probably the most overlooked and seemingly least important by most parents, is a holistic study of history, because especially of anthropology, because when we're talking about the social contract and your rights and benefits as a citizen, all the things that you just listed off are things that in a tribal or a shamanic culture, even today, you don't have to worry about those things. Right. Right. And this is where if you have a holistic view, as I try to have of society, I wouldn't trust that, that if something happened to me and everybody else in my family, that my kids would be well taken care of by the state. Right. You know? Right. And in shamanic cultures, you have these sort of, you don't have the nuclear family with, separated neighbors and everybody's going on about their business. You have an entirely different way of life as a culture and as a society. Yeah. Yeah. And, when I started my podcast and my platform and called it Shamanic Philosophy, it was obviously philosophy being, let's ask big questions that matter to life, the biggest questions we can. And then on the shamanic side, it was to have a holistic understanding of the spiritual and the material, and finding balance in between. And so when I see this political system and the whole culture built around it, people can ask me where I find myself politically, but it's funny. I might be in one place politically today, but my hope is that as a culture, I could be further down the road later. In other words, today, I mean, essentially, a shamanic culture operates politically as a libertarian culture. Right. They have essentially no government, none of that stuff. But if I said I'm a libertarian today, then it's going to conjure up images that I want to leave the homeless, the sick, and the infirm on the street. Because we're not in a culture where we could sustain or support that. If we went libertarian tomorrow, it wouldn't turn into a shamanic culture. It wouldn't be that kind of civilization. It'd be a lot of poor, stupid people on the street. Right. And so, I'd love to have another chat with you sometime and talk about what would be some changes that we could look at from a policy standpoint. And just do some theory crafting, some thought experiments, and just say, hey, maybe get a little stoned and just say, this would, this is, man, wouldn't it be really cool if, everybody got a free puppy on their 13th birthday or something? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'd love to do that, man, but it's been such a blast talking with you. It's been enlightening.
Well, good. I'm glad. Likewise. Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to, to
spread your propaganda.
Stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Well, on that note, man, I'm going to send you off. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Costa Rica. Okay. Make sure you have at least 1 to 3 Mai Tais for me while you're down there.
I'll do that.
Keep running that page. You're doing badass. I think you're doing, not that my opinion counts for much, but I do appreciate the balanced perspectives on things. and I wish you the very best, man.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
All right, take care, buddy.
All right, see you.
That's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you had as good of a time listening as I did talking with Deez the Liberal, and I look forward to having him back on. What a great guy. What a cool conversation to have. Make sure you check us out on shamanicphilosophy.com. Make sure that you like and subscribe and share this video either on YouTube or iTunes or SoundCloud, whatever it is that you're listening to it or watching it on. And appreciate you guys so much. Also, we've got a conscious lifestyle marketplace coming up soon online at wokeshop.com. Get all your hippity-dippity pseudo-spiritual stuff on there. Clothing, jewelry, crystals, candles, essential oils, artwork, pretty much whatever you want. All the good stuff. Come check it out. That's it for today, guys. Thanks so much. May the light be upon you. May peace be within you. And may you be a sun on the paths of all men. God bless you guys. Have a great week.